Thank you so much, Mr. Shi, Dr. Lee, Dr. Amon Vivat, and Mr. To. Ladies and gentlemen, that was our panel for the day for the first session of discussion, where we have people phoning from overseas, and we'll see more of that later towards the rest of the part of the program. Now we're going to shift gears now as we hold a fireside chat with Mr. Tatsuya Kamoi, President and CEO of ABeam Consulting, on the topic of redefining the competitive edge, corporate transformation in the time of crisis. He is joining us here today from Japan. Now, I would like to welcome as well Managing Director of Nikkei Group Asia, Sonoko Watanabe, who will be helming this session. Sonoko-san, please.
Thank you, Dylan. And thank you for the introduction and good evening. And so this title of this session is Redefining the Competitive Edge, Corporate Transformation in the Time of Crisis. So what does it mean? Although we are still facing the great uncertainty about when the COVID crisis will finally end, but at the same time, we have been witnessing the acceleration of the structural changes in the global business world. Yeah, as we heard today in previous sessions, and also that at the same time, we have been observing even the small company, regardless of the scale, they are now pursuing the new corporate value. So today's our session, we would like to discuss about what is a new driver for the sustainable growth. So our guest speaker is Mr. Tatsuya Kamoi, our President and CEO of ABeam Consulting. So he's joining from Tokyo. And our understanding is that the role of a consulting company is to work with the variety of client companies in order to help them to make quite very important business decisions. So in this session, we will share his insight on the new definition of the global competitiveness in this COVID area and after COVID area. So before starting the discussion, let me make a brief introduction about ABeam. The company was born in Japan around 41 years ago, and it has grown up to the global company. So for example, in ASEAN, ABeam has offices in 6 cities, like Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Penang, Ho Chi Minh City, Jakarta, and Bangkok. So these locations reflect the path of ABeam's globalization as a strategic partner of many Japanese companies' expansion in ASEAN. So now ABeam helps not only the Japanese companies' business globally, but also the helping non-Japanese companies' global expansion. So I heard that among around 6,600 staffs worldwide, 1,600 belong to offices in overseas, and also another several hundred staff help overseas operation from Tokyo. And Mr. Kamoi assumed this position in 2020, but before that, also he has long experience of the consulting business, including the PwC, IMA, IBM, and other companies. So let's start discussion. Mr. Kamoi, thank you for joining. So our first question is, as I said, we are still in the midst of the pandemic, so it might be a bit difficult to confront these challenges just right before our eyes, but in the future, let's say like after 10 years, 20 years, or even 50 years from now on, when we look back at this part of the 21st century, how do you think you might assess and evaluate these tough years from the perspective of the global management hindsight? And also the additional related one is because you were here the last years, our Innovative Asia as a panelist, and at the time we discussed about the importance of the COVID on the global supply chain. And at that time you said that drastic changes were absolutely necessary. So So after 1 year, have you seen enough drastic changes in the way of the corporate management? And if so, could you share some real examples and why these companies succeed? Sorry, a lot of questions, but please start, Kamoi-san.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this session. It is very unfortunate for me not to be able to go to Singapore, but remotely, I'd like to be participating in this session. To your questions, in looking back on this era, marked by the expansive breadth of impact that a COVID-19 pandemic has, it will be quite difficult to describe it all in one symbolic phrase. But by narrowing the focus to the point of view of corporate management, I can say, or I would like to say, hopefully, that this is era of a departure for the future. There can be no doubt that the impact of COVID-19 has spread more extensively and for a longer time period than we initially anticipated. Nor can we deny that it has deepened our anxiety of the future. But on the other hand, as I mentioned at last year's Nikkei Innovative Asia, it is a fact that many companies had already begun working on some sort of structural transformations as a matter of business survival before COVID-19 posed these worldwide challenges. What I meant by sort of drastic change last year was the certain sense of urgency driven by corporate organizations. Then, I think the change before we have to mindset is pervading corporate organizations rather than remaining as isolated sense of crisis shared only among top management leadership teams. And it is still too early to introduce well-completed reference cases for these transformative program or drastic changes. But we can identify an increasing trend in which large corporations are trying to redesign their comprehensive operational models built up over decades of the business history across their entire value chain, and importantly, to revisit the value of data integration throughout a given value chain. At ABeam Consulting, we have been implementing what we call EA, or Enterprise Application. EA focusing on reconstructing core business process design in each industry while building up the supporting core system. But recent EA programs aim at reinventing the whole approach to the businesses by expanding the scope to that of data-driven transformation, which require integration and optimization of data stored in the enterprise processes or applications. So we are positioning this approach to the business expansion as a shift from EA to EX, which stands for enterprise transformation. For example, the main subject of last year's Nikkei Innovative Asia was digital transformation in supply chain management. Many companies had already been working to reinforce risk management in their supply chain management based on the experience with the devastating natural disasters such as earthquakes or catastrophic flood. In spite of this continuous effort, however, the broader and a more far-reaching impact of the pandemic has devastated well-planned supply chain model by preventing people from moving around and goods from being distributed across countries or regions. It is now necessary to re-evaluate potential risk, including identify the geopolitical risk across national and regional borders, and assessment of the business maturity of key countries and their cultural differences, while including digital transformational solutions among the many options appropriate to resolving these issues. And also ESG-related constellations representing an important perspective. And I think such multidimensional approaches driven by this drastic change mindset that extend beyond a simple focus on supply chain management related matters.
Yeah. Can I just some related questions? Now you said the words like EX, the enterprise transformation, but so the word DX is now quite popular, digital transformation. And also we used a lot of words like corporate restructuring. So could you elaborate a bit how EX is different from those previous words?
Yeah, I think at ABeam we often use the EX for a future sort of a growth stage, but not very well recognized yet in the market. But I think DX is used for such broad areas. For instance, some may think that RPA is a kind of DX, and some say there are different type of DX like aggressive DX or passive DX or decisive DX. So when we conducted the survey of DX success or failure last year, we got the impression that the definition of DX is so different in each respondents of the survey and a perspective and implications. Why we use the term of EX is based on our strengths on the enterprise process design and application. We sort of aim to focus on data stored in the value chain of enterprise application. So EX is primarily to help client or work with the client to realize a data-driven management decision model. And to your question, restructuring is to fix something or make some changes in the existing issues. From our implication, the EX is to change sort of the value chain management model completely, or which is very different from change how to do something. So that is I think the difference between the restructuring and enterprise transformation.
So this means maybe the EX is just beyond some technical words, more like the overhaul of the corporate structure or probably the company's mission itself. But if so, you define the character of this era as a departure for future. So do you think that also the definition of the competitiveness and probably requirement for survival for companies also has been completely changed? Because even before the COVID, there have been a lot of talks. For example, even the United States, like there is some shift from the shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. And now some words like the corporate purpose or corporate purpose-driven management got a lot of attentions. So you are the head of the consultancy, which has been watching maybe the rise and the fall of the Japanese companies or Asian companies for a long time. Like, how do you think the important, maybe the driver, most important driver, or three most important drivers for the companies to survive the post-COVID era?
I do not think that the foundation of corporate competitiveness would change drastically in a post-COVID-19 conditions. But suffice it to say that the foundation will still consist of three elements: continuous commitment to providing services or product which are valuable to society, the capability to consistently drive transformation by pivoting on the company's own core competitiveness, and a diverse leadership teams determined to lead. And I believe the essential quality of the business leaders or leadership team is to make one's own decisions and to own responsibility for each decision. But additionally, given our business environment characterized by future uncertainty, it is essential to build a relationship of trust between organizations and individuals and to maximize organizational capabilities by optimizing individual strengths. One key to this notion is to cope with the both top-down implementations and a personal empowerment simultaneously in the decision-making model. Let me give you some example. I was quite impressed by two aspects of Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla's article of the background to his firm's unprecedented success in launching its mRNA vaccine within a phenomenally short time frame. One aspect is that when teams proposed several options that had already been proven by past experience, the leadership team, including Mr. Bourla, encouraged teams to propose fresh ideas they considered superb, even though they had not been experimentally verified. He thought that proven approaches might not be relevant enough to deal with as yet unexperienced new event like COVID-19. Another aspect that impressed me was that once the leadership team determined approaches for the new vaccine development and the launch, they secured a budget, and then they respected the discretion of each team. Mr. Bourla even decided to turn down the government aid so that each team could be freed from attendant burden of paperwork. So I think a key to rebuilding trusting relationship between organization and individual is how organizationally fully support the optimization of individual employees' performance. So I think management attention to non-financial capital, such as people engagement, will come more into focus as a foundation of the enterprise competitiveness in the future.
Yeah, it is quite important to hear about this importance of the non-financial information or non-financial corporate resources, and also the importance of the human capital, because also in Asia now people are competing to get the good talent. Yeah, not only the small company but also big company. But also, yeah, maybe we need to talk about the Asia. So title of today's event is Innovative Asia. So this wording really reflects the strong expectation for the Asian century. And there are a variety of the business players in Asia or the ASEAN, such as large-scale state-owned enterprise or family conglomerates, and of course, emerging tech startups and foreign-owned companies, including Japanese companies or European, US companies. And all of them have been playing the very important pillars of the growth in the region. So, but do you think the Asian century could continue even after the COVID crisis, in particular the ASEAN? And also, are there any rediscovered strengths or the weakness of the Asian and the Japanese companies during COVID era? And if you say the departure for future is quite important for the business strategy, what is necessary for Asian companies in order to keep growth and become the quite resilient companies?
First of all, Beam Consulting has set our midterm vision of becoming the first choice in the emerging Asian market. Particularly Southeast Asian countries were heavily impacted by COVID-19, sort of revealing vulnerabilities in their business fundamentals. And while we needed to understand inherited risks behind the positive expectation of potential and rapid market growth, we will continue to focus on Asian market. As we look at our Japanese multinational client strategies, we see a reviving appetite for the investment in overseas market. And according to the recent report by the Japan Bank of International Cooperation, 8 out of the 10 countries ranked highest as investment target by Japanese companies are in Asian region. The world's biggest trade, free trade agreement, RCEP, is expected to create another positive momentum. In addition to continued focus of Japanese client in Asian market, ABeam Consulting are aiming to grow opportunities for Asian enterprises, which include programs such as establishment of data-driven management model or digital transformation of customer interactions to deal with the new normal emerging from the COVID-19 situation. But I think the companies that are growing solely in the Asian market may face challenges in expanding their global business opportunity if they keep adhering to business models that are relevant solely for the Asian market requirement. They needed to consider whether they intended to aim for beyond Asia model. As a leading company in Southeast Asian countries, including family-owned businesses, they tend to share a sense of urgency more evidently than Japanese companies. And I think top-down decision-making is more effective in such companies. And many of their new generation leaders are educated in the US or Europe, and they are vigorously adopting Westernized approaches and new technologies. But at the same time, business foundations or fundamentals, such as underlying nature of markets, employee mindset of corporate culture, not necessarily ready yet to accept too rapid or too sweeping Westernization. Let me illustrate this with an example of CK Power, a Thai power company which ABeam Consulting worked with for its business transformation. CK Power successfully customized the global standard solution to their own corporate culture. But they also introduced Kaizen from Japanese companies and changed their management approach to execute their transformative program. I believe a key success factor in this program was ABeam consultant members who understand both global best practices as well as approaches Japanese companies take to large-scale programs. Our consultant worked very closely with the CK Power members until the real operation cycle was fully functional. So we intend to continue engaging in this hands-on work for transformative programs with our Asian client as we jointly create and share client value in ways that enable Asian companies to grow with resilience in the face of the significant changes in the market dynamics such as the pandemic.
Thank you, Kamoi-san. And I'm afraid that it is about time to close. And thank you, Kamoi-san, for sharing the insight with us. And that forum will continue. And we have more speakers who actually represent a new definition of the competitiveness we're just talking about. Okay, so please stay watching. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.